The night was cold and quiet, and the little room smelled of old paint and rainwater dripping through the window. Lila sat on the edge of her small bed, holding her cracked phone in both hands. Her eyes were red from crying, but she tried not to make a sound because her mother was sleeping in the next room, coughing softly from time to time. The old light bulb above her head flickered again and again, casting a weak yellow glow over the bare walls and the pile of unpaid bills on the table, and looked at her phone screen and sighed. She had been trying all day to reach her friend Mia, who sometimes helped her with money, but there was no reply. Her heart felt heavy. She had lost her job 2 weeks ago when the restaurant she worked at closed down, and now there was nothing left in her savings. She looked at her mother's medicine bottle. It was almost empty, and the pharmacy would not give more without payment. Lila felt like the world was closing in on her. Her fingers shook as she opened her messages and typed slowly, "Hi Mia, I really need help. I don't know what to do anymore. Mom is sick. I have no job and no money. Please reply. If you can lend me something just for a few days, I will pay you back when I find work. I promise." She took a deep breath and pressed send. Then she dropped the phone on the bed and buried her face in her hands, praying that Mia would answer soon. But the reply that came a few minutes later was not from Mia. The phone buzzed and Lila grabbed it quickly. Her heart lifted for a second before she read the words. "Who is this? Are you okay?" She frowned. It was not Mia's number. She looked again, confused. Did she type it wrong? She checked the number and realized she had pressed one wrong digit. The message had gone to a stranger. Lila bit her lip, embarrassed. She started typing again. "I'm sorry, I sent this to the wrong number. Please ignore it." Then she paused. The message she got back was not rude. It was calm, almost gentle. "Are you sure you are fine? You sound like you need help." Something about those words made her chest tighten. No one had asked her that in a long time. Not since her father passed away 2 years ago and her life started falling apart. Slowly she replied, "It's nothing really. I just sent it to the wrong person. Sorry." Again. The stranger replied, "Right away. If you ever need to talk, you can tell me." Sometimes talking helps. Lila stared at the screen, surprised. Why would a stranger care? She hesitated for a long time before typing, "Thank you, but you don't even know me." "That is true," the stranger wrote back. "But I can still listen if you want." Lila felt a strange warmth. She did not know who this person was, but something about the tone felt safe. She imagined maybe it was an older woman or a kind teacher. She had no idea that the person on the other side was Ethan Gray, the youngest CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. A man everyone described as cold and serious, a man who never answered unknown numbers. Yet for some reason her message had caught his attention. At that moment, Ethan sat in his office on the top floor of a tall glass building. The city lights stretched far below him, but he barely saw them. He was reading her message again and again. The sadness in her words made him curious. He had everything people dreamed of: money, success, power. But when he read her message, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt human. He typed slowly again. "Are you safe right now? Do you have someone with you?" Lila blinked reading it. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, "Why does he care?" She looked at her sleeping mother through the half-open door and her eyes filled with tears again. She typed back, "I'm okay. My mom is sick, but she is resting. I just needed someone to talk to." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen. He had no idea who she was, but her honesty touched him. He wanted to help, but he also knew most people would not trust a stranger online. So, he decided to stay anonymous for now. He typed again, "I'm glad your mom is resting. If you ever need to talk, you can message me anytime." Lila smiled faintly for the first time that day. She whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are," and sent it. Her heart felt lighter even though nothing had changed around her. She had no job, no money, and no clear future. But for the first time in a long time, she did not feel completely alone. On the other side of the city, Ethan placed his phone on the desk and stared. Out the window, the rain had started again, tapping softly on the glass. He did not understand why a random message from an unknown girl mattered so much to him, but he knew one thing. The sadness in her words was real, and something deep inside him told him this was not the last message he would receive from her. As Lila closed her eyes that night, she did not know that her mistake had started a story that would change both of their lives forever. The wrong message she sent would soon become the most important conversation she would ever have. Ethan sat at his desk long after the office lights had dimmed and the city outside had gone quiet. The sound of rain tapping against the glass walls of his tall office echoed softly in the room. His suit jacket hung over the back of his chair, and his tie was loose around his neck. He kept looking at his phone again and again. The message from the unknown girl still glowed on the screen, and for reasons he could not explain, he could not stop thinking about her words. All his life, Ethan had been told that feelings were a weakness. He had built an empire from nothing. He had worked day and night, never depending on anyone, never letting emotion get in the way. But tonight, her message broke through the walls he had built around his heart. The girl had written with such pain, yet such honesty, that he could almost feel her struggle through the small glowing screen. He picked up his phone again and typed slowly. "You said your mom is sick. How is she now?" There was a long pause before the reply came. "She is sleeping now," Lila wrote softly. "I am trying my best to take care of her, but it's not easy. Sometimes I wish I could do more." Ethan stared at her words, and for the first time in many years he felt something deep and unfamiliar. He wanted to help her, but he did not want to scare her away. He simply replied, "You are doing your best, and that is already something to be proud of." Lila read his message and felt warmth spread. In her chest, no one had said kind words to her in a long time. Every day, people ignored her or treated her like she was invisible. But this stranger who did not even know her name was kind. She found herself smiling a little as she wrote back, "Thank you. It means a lot." Their messages continued through the night. Each time her phone buzzed, Lila felt a little less lonely. They talked about small things, like the rain outside, and the smell of old books, and the sound of traffic in the distance. Ethan asked questions about her dreams, and she told him she once wanted to open a small bakery with her mother to sell cupcakes and bread made from her grandmother's recipe. She laughed softly, typing, "Maybe one day when life gets kinder." Ethan smiled. At her words, he could almost imagine her voice gentle but strong. He replied, "Maybe that day will come sooner than you think." She did not know he meant it. She thought it was only kindness from a stranger, but he was already thinking of ways to help her, though he still did not tell her his real name. In the morning, Ethan arrived at his company early as always, but his mind was not on business meetings or profit charts. His assistant noticed he looked distracted. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked. Quietly, he nodded but said little. For the first time, the thought of another person, someone who had nothing to do with his world, stayed with him through every meeting. Meanwhile, Lila walked through the crowded streets holding a small paper bag of bread she had bought for her mother. She looked tired, but her eyes were brighter than before. She checked her phone, hoping to see a message from E, but there was none yet. Still, she smiled, knowing he would text later. He always did that evening as the sun set and the sky turned gold. Her phone buzzed again. She quickly picked it up. It was him again. "How was your day?" he wrote. She replied with a little laugh. "Busy but fine. I cleaned the house and took Mom to the clinic. The doctor said she needs better food and rest, but food costs too much now." Ethan's heart sank as he read that he wanted to send her money, but he knew she would never accept help from a stranger. So he decided to talk to her more and gain her trust. He replied, "I understand. Things can be hard, but please don't lose hope. Sometimes help comes from where we least expect it." Lila looked at the message and whispered softly, "Maybe you are right." Days passed, and they kept talking every night. Lila did not know his face or his world of glass towers and expensive suits. But she felt like she knew his heart. He listened without judging, and she shared everything about her mother, her fears and her hopes. She even started calling him simply E, as he had told her once. It felt personal and warm, like having a friend who really cared. One night, while sitting by the small window watching the moonlight fall over the city, Lila typed a message that she had never dared to send before. She wrote, "You know, E, sometimes I think you are not real. You talk like someone from another world." Ethan smiled sadly, reading her message. He typed back, "Maybe I am from another world, but I like being in yours." Lila laughed softly, whispering to herself, "Whoever you are, thank you for staying." That night, Ethan could not sleep. He looked out his window at the same moonlight she was watching miles away and wondered why her voice echoed in his heart so deeply. For the first time, he did not feel like the rich man everyone admired. He felt like a lonely man finally finding something real in a world full of empty words. And as the night grew quieter, both of them sat by their windows, miles apart, yet strangely connected by a few simple words on a glowing screen, neither knowing that this bond formed by accident would soon change everything in their lives forever. The night sky was painted in shades of silver and blue, and the soft wind carried the smell of rain again. Lila sat near her window, watching the streetlights flicker below. Her mother was asleep after taking her medicine, and the little room was quiet, except for the hum of the ceiling fan. She held her phone in her hand, waiting for the small screen to light up. The only thing that made her heart feel warm these days was that familiar message tone from E, the stranger who had somehow become her friend. When her phone buzzed, her lips curved into a faint smile. She opened the message and read, "Good evening. How was your day today?" Lila replied quickly with her small fingers. "It was fine. I helped my neighbor's child with homework and then cooked soup for Mom." "How about you far away in his luxury apartment?" Ethan smiled as he read her message. He was sitting on a couch, still in his white shirt sleeves rolled up, the city glowing behind him through tall windows. He replied, "I had meetings all day, but I kept thinking about your dream of a bakery. You said your grandmother taught you to bake." Right? Lila's eyes widened in surprise. She typed, "Yes, she did. She was the kindest woman I knew. She always said that when you bake with love, people can taste it in every bite." She paused and smiled a little, remembering the smell of her grandmother's kitchen. She added, "I still have her old recipe book. Though the pages are torn." Ethan imagined that small old book in her hands, and for a moment, he could almost smell the sweetness of bread in his mind. He wrote, "Maybe one day you can show me one of your recipes." Lila laughed softly, reading it. She typed, "You would not want that, trust me. My baking is terrible now. I only make plain bread because flour and sugar are expensive." Ethan's heart tightened again as he read her words. He wished he could just send her everything she needed, but he knew if he told her who he really was, she might never speak to him again. He wanted her to talk to him, not because he was rich or powerful, but because she wanted to. He decided to wait for the right moment. As the days went by, their messages became longer and warmer. Sometimes Lila would fall asleep with her phone in her hand, still smiling after reading one of his gentle replies. Ethan, on the other hand, began to feel something new. He had spent years surrounded by people who only spoke to him out of fear or admiration. But this girl, this stranger, spoke to him like a real person. She made him laugh without trying. She made him think about life in a different way. One night, as the rain poured harder than before, Lila sat near the window again, her face lit by the soft glow of her phone. She typed, "I sometimes wonder what you look like. You talk like someone older, maybe someone who has seen the world." Ethan stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Maybe I am older than you think. Or maybe I have just seen too much." Lila giggled, reading it, and replied, "Then I will just imagine you as someone kind with tired eyes but a warm smile." Ethan looked at his reflection in the glass. He did have tired eyes, but he had not smiled in a long time until now. Somehow her message made him do it. He replied, "And I will imagine you as someone who never stops trying, even when the world is unfair. Lila felt tears sting her eyes. She whispered softly, "You make me feel seen." She typed the same words to him. He read them in silence, feeling something heavy yet beautiful in his chest. For a man who had everything, he realized he had never been this close to anyone. Days turned into weeks and their bond grew stronger. Lila would tell him about her daily struggles, about the cheap groceries she bought and how she sang to her mother. To make her laugh, Ethan told her small things about his life too, though never revealing the truth. He said he worked with people who were always in a rush, who forgot how to be kind. She told him, "Maybe you can remind them." He replied, "Maybe you already have." Then one night everything changed. Lila did not send her usual message. The clock ticked past midnight and Ethan kept checking his phone again and again. No good night, no smiley face. Nothing. The next morning there was still no message. He waited another day. Still nothing. He felt a strange panic rising in his chest. He tried to tell himself maybe her phone was broken, but deep down he knew something was wrong. On the third day he could not take it anymore. He opened his computer and typed her number into his private network, using resources only someone like him could access. His heart pounded as he saw the name appear, Lila Harris, and an address to a small neighborhood near the edge of the city. Without thinking, he grabbed his car, keys, and drove through the rain streets, flashing by like streaks of light. His driver asked where to go, but he only said, "Keep driving. I'll tell you the way." When he finally reached the narrow street, the rain had stopped and the air smelled of wet soil. He found the small building and walked up the worn steps. His suit was soaked, but he did not care. He knocked on the door again and again until finally a neighbor opened the window and said, "She's at the hospital. Her mother fell sick." Again, Ethan's heart sank as the world around him blurred. He turned toward his car and whispered softly, "Hold on, Lila, I'm coming." The sky was dark and heavy as Ethan's car sped through the empty roads, the rain falling like silver threads against the windows. His chest tightened with every second that passed, and his hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred outside, but he saw none of it. All he could see in his mind was the face of a girl he had never met yet somehow felt deeply connected to. The thought that something might have happened to her made his heartbeat quicken. In fear, when he reached the hospital, the air smelled of medicine and wet floors, and the sound of crying echoed from the halls. He walked quickly to the front desk, his expensive shoes splashing small puddles on the floor. "Excuse me," he said breathlessly. "I am looking for Lila Harris. She brought her mother here. Where can I find her?" The nurse looked up at him, surprised by the sight of a man in a soaked designer suit asking with such urgency. She checked the file and said, "Room 206, down the hall on the right." Ethan hurried through the corridor, his heart thumping louder with each step. He stopped at the door and saw her sitting on a wooden chair outside the room. Her head was resting against the wall, her eyes half closed and her hands trembling slightly as she held a small paper cup of water. She looked tired, fragile and lost, but there was still something soft about her, like a light that refused to die even in the darkest night. He took a slow breath and walked closer. She didn't notice him until his shadow fell across her face. When she looked up, her eyes widened. She gasped quietly, seeing a tall man with wet hair and gentle eyes standing before her. "Are you Lila?" he asked softly. She nodded, confused. "Yes. Who are you?" He hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "I'm E for a second." She just stared at him as if trying to understand. Then she blinked, her eyes filling with tears. "You're E," she whispered. "You came here." Why? Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I was worried about you. You stopped texting and I thought something bad happened." Lila shook her head, still shocked. "You're not how I imagined you." She looked at his clothes, his watch, his calm voice, and realized he was someone far from her world. He sat beside her on the empty chair, saying quietly, "How is your mother?" Lila looked toward the room through the small glass window. "She's sleeping now. The doctor said she needs proper care and better food." but I don't know how to pay for all of this." Her voice cracked at the end and she covered her face with her hands. Ethan's chest ached as he watched her cry. He wanted to tell her he could pay for everything right now, but he didn't want to make her feel small. He wanted her to trust him, not pity him. He said gently, "Don't worry for now. Just focus on her getting better." Lila nodded weakly, wiping her tears. She looked at him again, still trying to understand why a stranger cared so much. She asked quietly, "You're really E from the messages, right?" He smiled and nodded. "I am." She looked down at her hands, whispering softly, "I don't know what to say. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to." Ethan looked at her eyes and replied, "Maybe I didn't have to, but I wanted to." Sometimes we meet people who remind us what kindness means. Lila felt. Warmth spread through her chest. She had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone truly care. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the soft beeping of the machines inside the room. Then Ethan said gently, "You should eat something. You look pale." Lila shook her head. "I'm fine, really." He stood up and said, "I'll be right back." He went to the hospital cafeteria and returned a few minutes later with a small sandwich and a cup of coffee. He handed them to her. She hesitated before taking them, whispering, "Thank you." He smiled, saying, "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself too." As she ate slowly, he sat beside her, watching quietly. The rain had stopped outside, and faint moonlight was peeking through the window. For the first time, Ethan felt something he had not felt in years: peace. It was strange how sitting beside this poor girl in a hospital corridor made him feel more alive than any of his million-dollar meetings ever had. After a while, Lila looked up and said softly, "I don't understand you. You're kind and patient, but you never told me who you really are. You talk like someone important, but you act like someone humble." Ethan looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Maybe I'm just someone." For a moment there was silence between them. The sound of birds outside filled the quiet air, and the smell of morning coffee drifted through the corridor. Lila felt her heart soften a little. She whispered, "Maybe we are both lonely in different ways." Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe that's why fate decided to connect us with a wrong message that was actually right. Days passed, and Lila's mother grew stronger. Ethan visited them often, bringing books, flowers, and laughter. Sometimes he would sit beside Lila's mother, reading stories in a calm voice that made her smile, and Lila would watch him, wondering how someone so powerful could be so gentle. Each day her fear faded and was replaced with gratitude and warmth. One afternoon, as they sat together near the hospital garden, Ethan turned to her and said quietly, "Lila, I want to show you something tomorrow. Meet me outside the cafe near the park at 10. She looked at him curiously, but agreed. The next day she arrived at the park wearing a simple blue dress and holding her grandmother's old recipe book. The air smelled of fresh flowers and sunlight danced through the trees. When she saw Ethan standing by the cafe entrance, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. He smiled and said, "Come with me." He led her down the street until they stopped in front of a small shop. The windows were covered with brown paper and a sign hung on the door that said, "Opening." Soon Lila looked at him, puzzled. "What is this?" Ethan handed her a key and said, softly, "This belongs to you." Her eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "This is your bakery, Lila. The one you told me about weeks ago. The recipes, the dreams, the love you talked about. It all starts here." Her hands trembled as she held the key. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I can't accept this. It's too much." Ethan shook his head. "Yes, you can, and you will. Because this is not a gift, it's a promise. You once told me that when you bake with love, people can taste it. I want you to share that love with the world. I'll help you start, but the rest will be yours." Lila covered her mouth, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this for me?" Ethan looked at her eyes filled with warmth. Because you changed me, Lila. You reminded me that even the richest life means nothing without kindness and connection. You taught me that. Sometimes a stranger can show you what family feels like. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "You made me believe in good people again." He smiled, softly, "And you made me believe in second chances." They stood there in silence, the wind blowing gently through the street. Lila turned the key slowly and opened the door. Stepping inside, the small room smelled of fresh paint and hope. The counters were empty, but her heart was full. She imagined her mother standing there, smiling, proud and happy. She turned to Ethan and said quietly, "Thank you for turning my mistake into a miracle." Ethan smiled as he looked around the small bakery, sunlight pouring through the window. He said, "Sometimes the wrong text finds the right heart." Lila wiped her tears, laughing softly at his words. She whispered, "Then maybe my heart was waiting for yours all along." From that day, the little bakery became a symbol of kindness. People came from all over the city, not because of the bread, but because of the story behind it. The story of a poor girl who texted a stranger and found a friend who changed her life forever. And somewhere in that story, two hearts learned that love does not always start with a plan. Sometimes it begins with a single message sent by mistake. "Who forgot how to care until you reminded me?" Lila blinked, holding back tears. She whispered, "I didn't do anything." He smiled gently. "Yes, you did. You spoke to me like a friend, and that means more than you know." The nurse came out of the room and told Lila her mother was stable for now. Lila let out a deep breath of relief. Ethan stood beside her, watching her smile faintly for the first time since he arrived. That small smile made him realize he would do anything to keep it there. As she turned to thank him again, he said quietly, "Lila, tomorrow I will come again. I want to make sure you and your mother have what you need." She started to protest, but he raised his hand and said, "Please let me help. Not because I pity you, but because I care." Lila looked into his eyes and saw no pride, no judgment, just simple sincerity. She nodded slowly, whispering, "All right." Ethan smiled one last time before leaving the hospital. His car waited outside, but he stood there for a moment, looking back at the building, thinking how strange life was. A wrong message had led him to a girl who made him feel human again. Inside the hospital, Lila sat by her mother's bed, whispering softly to herself, "Maybe good people still exist, after all." The morning sun rose slowly through the hospital window, painting the white walls with a faint golden glow. Lila sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand gently. Her mother looked weak but peaceful, breathing softly under the thin blanket. The night had been long, but somehow Lila felt lighter inside. Maybe it was because of E, the mysterious stranger who had become a real person. Now, someone who had come all the way just to make sure she was okay. She still could not believe it. Her heart still beat faster whenever she remembered the moment he said, "I'm Ethan," had promised to come back that morning, and though she told herself not to expect it, her eyes kept glancing at the door every few minutes. When he finally appeared, carrying a small brown bag in one hand, she could not help but smile. He smiled back, saying softly, "I brought breakfast for you and your mother. I thought you both might be hungry." Lila blinked in surprise, her voice trembling. "You really didn't have to." He shook his head, saying, "Maybe I didn't, but I wanted to." He placed the bag on the table and took out 2 sandwiches, some fruit and a small bottle of juice. Lila watched him quietly, wondering again who this man really was. His clothes were neat, his voice calm and his eyes kind, yet there was something about him, something that felt powerful, as if he carried the weight of 100 people's lives on his shoulders. She did not ask, though she was afraid to ruin the gentle peace between them. As they ate together, Ethan asked, softly, "Do you have a place to work now?" Lila shook her head. "I lost my job at the restaurant. It closed down. They said business was bad." Ethan nodded, thinking quietly for a moment before saying, "I might know someone who could help you find something." Lila smiled weakly and said, Thank you, but you've already done too much. I can't take more help from you. He looked at her and said gently, Lila, when you help someone, it's not about counting how much you've done. It's about doing what feels right. She looked down, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She whispered, You talk like someone who's known pain. 2. Ethan's gaze grew distant for a moment, and he said softly, Maybe I have more than most people imagine. Later that day, Ethan had to leave for a meeting, but he promised to check on her again. Lila watched him walk away, wondering if she would ever see him after today. There was a strange fear in her chest, as if she might lose something precious that she never really had. That afternoon, while cleaning her mother's bedside table, Lila noticed a small card half sticking out from Ethan's bag. He must have forgotten it. She picked it up curiously. It was black with a golden logo at the center, and below it was written, Gray Industries. Her eyes widened. She had heard that name many times before. Everyone in the city knew about Gray Industries. The company belonged to Ethan Gray, the richest and youngest CEO in the region. Her hands began to shake. Could it be the same person? She felt her heartbeat quicken as she whispered to herself, No, it can't be. But deep down, she knew the truth. The expensive watch, the calm authority in his voice, the way the nurse looked at him with respect. It all made sense now. The man she had been texting for weeks was not just some kind stranger. He was one of the most powerful men in the city. Her first thought was disbelief, then came fear. She wondered why someone like him would talk to a poor girl like her. She sat on the hospital chair staring at the card, her mind racing. Maybe he felt sorry for me. Maybe I was just a charity story for him. She bit her lip, fighting the tears that burned her eyes. She had thought their friendship was real, but now she wasn't sure. When Ethan returned that evening, he found her quiet and distant. He smiled softly, saying, How's your mother now? Lila nodded without looking up. Better. She's resting. Ethan frowned, sensing something had changed. He asked gently, Are you all right? Lila. She hesitated. Before holding up the card,